back. If you're new here, my name is Michael Mazzani, and throughout the series, we've been going through Bushido, the soul of Japan, and not simply as a historical text, but as a living framework for character, discipline, conscientious growth in this modern world where everything seems to be happening so quickly, so fast. And today, with much sadness, with I don't know what to say. I don't know how to express how I'm feeling. But we reach the final chapter, and before we step into it, I want to briefly revisit chapter 16, not to repeat it, but to connect it. In that chapter, we saw how Bushido moved beyond the individual warrior and quietly shaped an entire society. It wasn't enforced by surveillance, nor was it dependent on applause. It worked because the values were internalized. Duty was not performed for attention, it was carried before because demanded it. And that struck me deeply because the real power of any code, whether it's Bushido uh, or your own personal standards, is not how it looks publicly, it's how it governs you privately. It made me ask myself, who am I when nothing is expected of me? And what do I choose when no one would know the difference? And that question opens the door to chapter 17. You know, this final chapter doesn't simply close the book, it reflects on what happens next. It considers whether Bushido fades or evolves, whether it dissolves into history or continues as a spirit that adapts with time. And as I introduce it, I want to shift the focus slightly from them to us, because maybe the real question is not whether Bushido survives. Maybe the real question is whether we choose to live by a code at all. What principles share your decisions when pressure hits, when business slows down? Do you panic or do you refine your strategy? When you feel tired, do you negotiate with your commitments or honor them? When conflict appears in relationships, do you escalate or seek understanding? Those small daily decisions are where a code becomes real. I mean, if this series has strengthened your thinking in any way, if it has challenged you to raise your standards even in the slightest bit, I encourage you to like the video, share it with someone who values growth, and subscribe to the channel. We are building something steady here, not hype, but depth. Now I'll begin reading chapter 17, which is titled The Future of Bushido. So take a seat, grab yourself a drink, and put your headphones on if my voice is good enough, and just have a listen, because this is what's gonna bring us to the close of this magnificent book. The future of Bushido, whose days seem to be already numbered. Ominous signs are in the air that betoken its future. Not only signs, but redoubtable forces are at work to threaten it. Few historical comparisons can be more judiciously made when between the chivalry of Europe and the Bushido of Japan, and if history repeats itself, it certainly will do with the fate of the latter what it did with that of the former. The particular and local causes for the decay of chivalry which St. Palais gives have, of course, little application to Japanese conditions, but the larger and more general causes that helped to undermine knighthood and chivalry in and after the Middle Ages are as surely working for the decline of Bushido. One remarkable difference between the experience of Europe and of Japan is that, whereas in Europe, when chivalry was weaned from feudalism and was adopted by the church, it obtained a fresh lease of life. In Japan, no religion was large enough to nourish it. Hence, when the mother institution, feudalism, was gone, Bushido, left an orphan, had to shift for itself. The present elaborate military organization might take it under its patronage, but we know that modern warfare can afford little room for its continuous growth. Shin- Shintoism, which fostered it which fostered it in its fancy, is self super superannuated. The hoary sages of ancient China are being supplanted by the intellectual parvenu of the type of Bentham and Mill. Moral theories of the comfortable kind, flattering to the chauvinistic tendencies of the time, and therefore thought well adapted to the need of this day, have been invented and propounded, but as yet we hear only their shrill voices echoing through the columns of yellow journalism. Principalities and powers are arrayed against the precepts of knighthood. Already, as Velbin says, the decay of the ceremonial code, or as it is otherwise called, the vulgarization of life among the industrial classes proper, has become one of the chief enormities of latter day civilization in the eyes of all persons of delicate sensibilities. The irresistible tide of triumphant democracy, which can tolerate no form or shape of trust, and Bushido was a trust organized by those who monopolized reserve capital of intellect and culture, fixing the grades and the value of moral qualities, is alone powerful enough to engulf the remnant of Bushido. The present societary forces are antagonistic to petty class spirit, and chivalry is, as Freeman severely criticizes, a class spirit. Modern society, if it pretends to any unity, cannot admit purely personal obligations devised in the interests of an exclusive class. Add to this the progress of popular instruction, of industrial arts and habits, of wealth and city life, then we can easily see that neither the keenest cuts of samurai swords, nor the sharpest shafts shot at from Bushido's boldest bows, can aught avail. The state, built upon the rock of honor and fortified by the same, shall we call it the Ernstadt, or after the manner of Carlyle and Hiroki, is fast falling into the hands of quibbling lawyers and gibbering politicians armed with logic chopping engines of war. The words which a great thinker used in speaking of Teresa and Antigone may aptly be repeated of the samurai, that the medium in which their ardent deeds took shape is forever gone. Alas for knightly virtues, alas for samurai pride! Morality ushered into the world with the sound of bugles and drums is destined to fade away as the captains and the kings depart. If history can teach us anything, the state built on martial virtues, be it a city like Sparta or an empire like Rome, can never make on earth a continuing city. Universal and natural as is the fighting instinct in man, fruitful as it has proved to be of noble sentiments and manly virtues, it does not comprehend the whole man. Beneath the instinct to fight, there lurks a diviner instinct to love. We have seen that Shintoism, Mencius, and Wang Yang Ming have all clearly taught it, but Bushido and all other militant schools of ethics, engrossed doubtless with questions of immediate practical need, too often forget duly to emphasize this fact. Life has grown larger in these latter times, callings nobler and broader than a warrior's claim our attention today. With an enlarged view of life, with the growth of democracy, with better knowledge of other peoples and nations, the Confucian idea of benevolence, dare I do add the Buddhist idea of pity, will expand into the Christian conception of love. Men have become more than subjects, having grown to the estate of citizens. Nay, they are more than citizens, being men. Though war clouds hang heavy upon our horizon, we will believe that the wings of the angel of peace can disperse them. The history of the world confirms the prophecy: the meek shall inherit the earth. A nation that sells its birthright of peace and backslides from the front rank of industrialism into the file of filibusterism, filibusterism, I apologize, makes a poor bargain indeed. When the conditions of society are so changed that they have become not only adverse but hostile to Bushido, it is time for it to prepare for an honorable burial. It is just as difficult to point out when chivalry dies as to determine the exact time of its inception. Dr. Miller says that chivalry was formally abolished in the year 1559 when Henry II of France was slain in a tournament. With, with us, the edict formally abolishing feudalism in 1870 was the signal to toll the knell of Bushido. The edict, issued 2 years later, prohibiting the wearing of swords, rang out the old years, rang out the unbought grace of life, the cheap defense of nations, the nurse of manly sentiment and heroic enterprise. It rang in the new age of sophisters, economists, and calculators. It has been said that Japan won her late war with China by means of Murata guns and Krupp cannon. It has been said the victory was the work of a modern school system. But these less than half truths, does ever a piano, be it of the choicest workmanship of Urba or Steinway burst forth into the rhapsodies of Liszt or the sonatas of Beethoven without a master's hand? Or if guns win battles, why did not Louis Napoleon beat the Perusians with his mitrailleuse, or the Spaniards with their Moses, the Filipinos, whose arms were no better than the old fashioned Remingtons? Needless to repeat what has to grown a trite saying that it is the spirit that quickeneth, without which the best of implements profiteth but little. The most improved guns and cannon do not shoot their own accord. The most modern educational system does not make a coward a hero. No, what won the battles on the Yalu in Korea and Manchuria was the ghosts of our fathers guiding our hands and beating in our hearts. They are not dead, those ghosts, the spirits of our warlike ancestors. Those who have eyes to see, they are clearly visible. Scratch a Japanese of the most advanced ideas, and he will show a samurai. The great inheritance of honor, of valor, and of all martial virtues is, as Professor Cram very fitly expresses it, but ours on trust, the fief inalienable of the dead and of the generation to come, and the summons of the present is to guard this heritage, nor to bate one jot of the ancient spirit. The summons of the future will be so to widen its scope as to apply it in all walks and relations of life. It has been predicted, and predictions have been corroborated by the events of the last half century, that the moral system of feudal Japan, like its castles and its armories, will crumble into dust, and new ethics rise phoenix like to lead New Japan in her path of progress. Desirable and probable as the fulfillment of such a prophecy is, we must not forget that a phoenix rises only from its own ashes, and that it is not a bird of passage, neither does it fly on pinions borrowed from other birds. The kingdom of God is within you. It does not come rolling down the mountains, however lofty. It does not come sailing across the seas, however broad. God has granted, says the Quran, to every people a prophet in its own tongue. The seeds of the kingdom, as vouched for and apprehended by the Japanese mind, blossomed in Bushido. Now its days are closing, sad to say, before its full fruition, and we turn in every direction for other sources of sweetness and light, of strength and comfort, but among them there is yet nothing found to take its place. The profit and loss philosophy of utilitarians and materialists finds favor among logic choppers with half a soul. The only other ethical system which is powerful enough to cope with utilitarianism and materialism is Christianity, in comparison with which Bushido, it must be confessed, is like a dimly burning wick, which the Messiah was proclaimed not to quench but to fan into a flame. Like his Hebrew precursors, the prophets, notably Isaiah, Jeremiah, Amos, and Habakkuk, Bushido laid particular stress on the moral conduct of rulers and public men and of nations, whereas the ethics of Christ, which deal almost solely with individuals and his personal followers, will find more and more practical application as individualism in its capacity of a moral factor grows in potency. The domineering, self-assertive, so-called morality of Nietzsche, itself akin in some respects to Bushido, is, if I am not greatly mistaken, a passing phase or temporary reaction against what he terms by morbid distortion the the humble, self-denying slave morality of the Nazarene. Christianity and materialism, including utilitarianism, or will the future reduce them to still more archaic forms of Hebraism and Hellenism, will divide the world between them. Lesser systems of morals will ally themselves on either side or for their preservation. On which side will Bushido enlist? Having no set dogma or formula to defend, it can afford to disappear as an entity, like the cherry blossom. It is willing to die at the first gust of the morning breeze. But a total extinction will never be its lot. Who can say that Stoicism is dead? It is dead as a system, but it is alive as a virtue. Its energy and vitality are still felt through many channels of life in the philosophy of Western nations, in the jurisprudence of all the civilized world. Nay, wherever man struggles to raise himself above himself, wherever his spirit masters his flesh by his own exertions, they will see the immortal discipline of Zeno at work. Bushido, as an independent code of ethics, may vanish, but its power will still not perish from the earth. Its schools of martial prowess or civic honor may be demolished, but its light and its glory will long survive their ruins. Like its symbolic flower, after it is blown to the four winds, it will still bless mankind with the perfume with which it will enrich life. Ages after, when the customaries shall have been buried and its very name forgotten, its odors will come floating in the air as from a far off unseen hill, the wayside gaze beyond. Then, in the beautiful language of the Quaker poet, the traveller owns the grateful sense of sweetness near he knows not whence, and pausing, takes with forehead bare and benediction of the air. That's all there is. Bushido. Get yourself a copy. As I reflect on this final chapter, I don't feel like closing I don't feel like I'm closing a book. I feel like I'm accepting responsibility because growth isn't loud. Um, it's often visible. It happens in the quiet moments when we decide not to react emotionally. When we choose preparation over procrastination, when we align our actions with long term outcomes rather than short term comfort, mental growth begins with awareness. For example, imagine you set a goal, perhaps to improve your finances. You say you want wealth, but you avoid reviewing your expenses because it feels uncomfortable. Conscious growth would ask you to sit down, open the statements, and face the numbers without emotion. That act alone builds strength. That it builds stability. It builds self-respect. The same applies to health. If you say you value energy yet consistently sacrifice sleep for distraction, there's a misalignment. Growth invites you to correct that misalignment without drama. It's not punishment, it's refinement. Success, in my view, is not explosive, it is stable. It is having organized time so that your day has structure rather than chaos. It's building routines that reduce decision fatigue. It is preparing in advance so that emergencies become manageable rather than overwhelming. I'll give you an example like organizing your week on a Sunday evening might seem simple, but that single habit can reduce stress, it will improve your productivity, and create mental space for creativity. That discipline, that is discipline serving as peace. And when we talk about building our wealth, it isn't only financial, it's a wealth of energy, it's a wealth of relationships and clarity. Financially, wealth grows when you delay gratification long enough to invest consistently. It grows when you track what you earn, what you spend, and what you build. It grows when you treat money not as emotion but as responsibility. Relationally, wealth grows when you become dependable. If you say you will call, you call. If you promise support, you show up. If there is tension, you address it with calm rather than ego. And reliability um, is a form of honor. Lasting relationships are not built on intensity, they're built on reliability. So, selflessness also becomes clearer through this lens. It is not self neglect, it is understanding that your actions affect more than just you. When you improve your discipline, your family feels stability. When you organize your time, your team experiences clarity. When you manage your emotions, your relationships gain safety, and safely as well. Being free of problems does not mean living without challenges. It means becoming equipped. If an unexpected bill arrives, preparation uh, turns it into an inconvenience rather than a crisis. If criticism appears, emotional maturity turns it into data rather than an attack. If plans change, flexibility turns it into adaptation rather than collapse. That's stability, and stability is deeply underrated in a world obsessed with speed. Everything is just happening so fast. I mean, we've had um, quite a turbulent week, but there's so much flow of information that sometimes it could seem overwhelming and it just creates confusion. So, happiness, I believe, is a byproduct of alignment. When your daily habits support your future goals, anxiety reduces. When your words match your actions, guilt dissolves. When your health is prioritized, energy rises naturally. You don't chase happiness, you construct it through standards. And what this final chapter leaves with me and leaves with us is this: the spirit of Bushido is not about the past, it's about personal governance. It is about waking up and asking, what does integrity require of me today? Not next year, not when conditions improve. Today, today, what does integrity require of me today? And before we close, I want to invite you to do something intentional. Take one principle from this entire series. There's so many great ones, whether it's discipline, courage, honor, self control. Uh, there's so many more, and apply it deliberately in this week that's coming. Choose a specific action, schedule it, execute it, observe the result. Growth does not require grand gestures, it requires repetition of small aligned behaviors. And if this series has added value to your mindset, and if you want to continue building mental strength, uh, financial literacy, emotional maturity, and discipline success together, then subscribe now and turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next. Share this finale with someone who is serious about evolving, not casually interested but committed, because knowledge alone changes nothing, embodiment changes everything. And as we close this journey, I'd leave you with the principle that governs my own life. Take 100% responsibility for everything that happens in your life, without exception and without condition. That is where power stabilizes. That is where clarity begins. That is where lasting success is built. In my next live stream or in my next upload, whichever may come first, I will be summarizing every chapter of this magnificent book. Um, we'll be going through it in one video. So that's to come up, and I will be announcing the next book, which I am really excited for. I'm actually looking at it; it's down there, but it's going to be really, really exciting. I can't wait to get into it. I can't wait to put into practice what I'm going to learn from it, and I can't wait to share it with all of you. So thank you for walking this path with me. Um, um, and this may be the final chapter of that book, but it is not the end of the discipline. And I look forward to seeing you all again on the next video. And until then, take care and thank you for joining me on here. Read.